Welcome back to the Shuffle Squad. Zach Lesage here. Today we're going to be covering over the top 10 meta Pokemon TCG decks in our Surging Sparks format. We just had Sacramento Regionals happen. We saw a lot of the top performing decks, a lot of the best players in the game travel to California, and we had a lot of the results updates from our meta update video that we've done earlier on this week. If you haven't got a chance to check that out, check out all of the content available on our channel. We've been dropping some absolute heat lately. In this video, I will be covering over the top 10 decks, deck lists included. You can check the pinned comment for all of the copy and pastable deck lists right from PTCG Live. And of course, give this video a like, subscribe on the channel, double check to see if you subscribed. It's Thanksgiving week, y'all. You can see if you've subscribed to the Shuffle Squad. And even if you just want to be like, yo, what's up, Zach? Love the videos, or hey, this is my top 10 decks, or I'm the first comment, anything, it does help boost the YouTube algorithm. That being said, let's jump into their number 10 pick and see what we got going on this week. Kicking off this week's top 10 best decks list is going to be Roaring Moon EX. Now, Roaring Moon has not been super relevant in the metagame, but it has been a performing deck, with Miraidon breathing some life into this deck, giving you an additional single prize card attacker, some different type, and Latias EX giving you potential free retreat where you might not want to use Petrant. It seems like there's some pretty good uses for Roaring Moon, just to go Calamity Storm, Frenzy Gouging against some bigger things, and really just kind of doing whatever you want. I think big basic decks are absolutely in a fantastic spot. We've had a certain deck, Regidrago, ruling the format for a while, and these decks certainly can just keep up in general. They all kind of have similar matchup spreads to one another. However, this build might actually grow in upcoming weeks, as we might see control decks kind of get more and more popular towards Stuttgart, Bogota, and Toronto and Perth regionals. So I'll have to see how this deck kind of shakes up in the metagame. I know I've already taken this to a cup about a month ago where I made top 4. Now that we're in Surging Sparks and we get these few buffs, might just be what this deck needed to kind of take it back to those original levels when it was incredibly popular when it was first released in the Paradox Rift format. If you need any of the cards for this deck or any of the decks featured in this video, you can always check the pinned comment first for the copy and pastable list. You can copy and paste it right into PTCG Live. You can go to Kayfabe Cards, they're a sponsor of the Shuffle Squad. They have a great selection, great group of people, so you can check out their link in the description. And if you need to craft any of these cards on PTCG Live, you can get some code cards from ptcgostore.com and plug in code TSS5. That being said, put your best guesses for the rest of the top 10 in the comments. Let's jump into our number 9 pick. At number 9, we have Lugia VSTAR, and Lugia VSTAR is one of those decks that I think is just incredibly powerful. The metagame's not really great for it right now, but that's not going to really hold it back. We look at it where we've seen quite a few lightning type decks kind of spawn from Surging Sparks. I mean, one of the main Pokemon in the set is a Pikachu EX, and while Pikachu EX can clearly knock out Lugia VSTAR with its Topaz Bolt attack, we've seen it expand into Miraidon decks. We've seen it added into Lost Zone box decks with Iron Hands. We've seen it kind of experimented as its own deck. And I think that's kind of put Lugia on a downward spiral from where it was probably a top 5 deck to now a lower top 10 deck. I don't really expect too much to shake Lugia out there. It has its dedicated followers, a dedicated list. It's seen arguably the most success out of any deck on this list. It's just maybe not the right position. Now, like I said with Roaring Moon, we do have quite a few decks at the bottom of this list that do have kind of strong matchups against control decks. So as we've seen some of the Pidgeot EX control, the Cornerstone Mimikyu decks, the Snorlax control decks kind of have their highlights at Sacramento Regionals. I expect that to happen a little bit more. We might see that kind of peak towards Toronto and Perth Regionals weekend. Decks like Lugia and the Roaring Moon and maybe some other decks are going to see a little bit more success towards that end. So if you are a fan of these decks, watch them as they rise over the next couple of weeks. That being said, it's at number 9 this week. Probably not going to get kicked out of the top 10, but let's see what we got going on at number 8. At number 8, we have another one of these decks that has been seemingly around forever. We have Gardevoir EX. Now, Gardevoir EX has seen the highest of highs, and right now it's probably a lower bottom top 10 deck. It has some strong matchup against some of the big basic decks, can hold its own against quite a few others. However, it does struggle against a few decks such as Miraidon that has that Iron Hands that can start knocking out your low HP Pokemon. It has some struggles against Regidrago that's probably up here on this list. And some of the matchups are pretty close to 50-50, meaning this is just a strong deck, not necessarily just the top deck that it once was. I think, again, with some metagame shifting, it could change, but we didn't really gain anything from Surging Sparks, whereas the Roaring Moon deck, we did see the Koraidon, the Latias. We didn't see anything in Lugia. We didn't see anything in Gardevoir. So these are really decks that were kind of top 5, 6, 7. Gardevoir is just going down a little bit. It didn't gain anything. It's just trying to figure out where it exists in this metagame right now. Still very early. We've only had the one major event in. We're only 1 week out from this set being legal now. So we'll have to see how the rest of the metagame shifts as we prepare for Stuttgart and Bogota and Perth and Toronto to round out the 2024 season. But I think Gardevoir, it's going to have a chance to see success. It has a lot of dedicated players that play it. It did see some decent placements at Sacramento Regionals. So if you are looking to see any of those, I did do an update to my kind of Sacramento meta update video yesterday. So our plan going forward is top 10 decks are always going to be on Fridays, but we will do meta update videos throughout the week after we have major events going on, where I can cover exactly what went on to those events. So check out the Limitless page for Gardevoir if you are trying to see any of the updates that other players might have brought. Basically, we're looking at Henry's winning Baltimore list, kind of rehashed with a couple card changes. At number 7, we have Terapagos EX. Now, Terapagos EX is going to be the same strategy of just slapping on a DTE, having that big bench, and using Dusknoir to pick off things that maybe have more HP, or picking off something on your opponent's bench. This deck did not gain anything from Surging Sparks. Just to give you a TLDR on the set, not many things did gain anything from Surging Sparks. It birthed a few archetypes that probably aren't in the top 10 right yet. Some of them did okay in Sacramento. A lot of them probably not top 10 worthy right now. This deck didn't gain anything like most of the decks on this list. It just gained the metagame positioning. Now, it does do pretty good against some of those big basic decks like Miraidon, Raging Bolts, Roaring Moon, and I'll even throw in Gouging Fire, and that's what gives it a good matchup against some of those decks. Also having a strong matchup against Gardevoir for the most part. Terapagos is pretty well positioned, but as we've already seen a few of those decks, those are lower top 10 decks, maybe played a little bit less than some other decks on this list. So that's relatively where it's positioned. As the metagame continues to grow and things kind of shift, we might see some of the top decks kind of move up, and that means Terapagos might be able to latch on there. If you're a fan of Terapagos EX, nothing wrong with it. It does have a decent matchup spread right now, but we will have to see how it continues to go with regionals happening in Stuttgart, Bogota, Perth, and Toronto. This is a great time to remind everyone, if you could leave a like on this video and maybe a comment just being like, yo, I like the vid, hey, where's this deck, or anything of the sorts. I know a lot of you have been listening and leaving comments, and the support and the kind of growth of these videos, the top 10 meta decks videos on Fridays have been outstanding. We've been averaging about 20K views, which is like huge for this channel. All that really does help out. I've been trying to power through everything, even through sickness. I don't know if you could hear my voice. I've been dealing with a bit of a sinus infection, chest congestion, you know, the good old 1-2 punch of the winter, but we're getting through it, and I just really want to appreciate and just tell everyone that I appreciate all y'all. So thank you so much, and every single like, share, subscribe, comment does help our channel grow. Let's jump into our number 6 pick. At number 6, we have the very powerful coin string cheese man, Gholdengo EX. Now, we saw Victor de Velasco make top 4 with this deck at Sacramento Regionals. I absolutely love their build. I covered something very similar on our tabletop gameplay, so if you haven't got a chance to check that out, check out some of our tabletop gameplay. With the Toja, because I had Dusknoir on my list as well to try to abuse that Wonder Kiss ability a little bit more, but I do like the refined version of Victor's list, being able to use Gholdengo and maybe put yourself into a 1-2 attack, win the game against 2 prizers, now turning them into 3 prizers. This deck is one of the decks that did gain something new with that Toja Kiss, with that new Gimmighoul, with that minor update of minor Aaron running, and of course Energy Surge Pro to make this deck very colorful. Being able to search out a bunch of energies is super powerful because you can just rip them and get that attack off, even knock out some of your biggest Pokemon like Charizard EX. I think Gholdengo EX with these buffs is probably here to stay, and Togekiss does kind of cut off the need for needing something like Lugia VSTAR in previous builds to have that single prize card attacking opportunity with Radiant Greninja. Just a reminder, all the lists are available in the pinned comments, so if you haven't got a chance to check those out, you can copy and paste these right into PTCG Live and start playing with those cards right away. We're halfway through the list. Put your best guesses for the top 5 decks in the comments below, and let's jump into our number 5 pick. At number 5 this week, we have Raging Bolt EX, one of the best decks in format, and it's fallen down a little bit to number 5. Like most other decks on this list, not really gaining much, but it did gain Miraidon, like the Roaring Moon deck that we had at number 10, giving yourself an additional single prize card attacker. Now, I have seen some lists play it, I have seen some lists not play it. I like having both so I can maybe have 2 single prize card Pokemon to deal with decks like Gardevoir, deal with other single prize card decks, but we'll have to see how the metagame shapes out. Otherwise, it's not otherwise the most important card in the deck. We're still going to be ripping those energies with Bellowing Thunder, loading up energies with Professor Sada's, and maybe even attacking with Teal Mask Ogerpon EX. Where this deck is really struggling is there's a lot of other big basic decks that are all kind of vying for that spot. There are a handful of kind of control-esque decks that are stopping this deck from seeing success, because I mean, 2 switch card isn't always going to get you all the way there. And of course, Raging Bolt is not a perfect deck like any other deck on this list, so it just has its own faults where sometimes it falls a little bit short. Number 5 is nothing to scoff at. I think if you're a fan of Raging Bolt, it's a safe play going forward. You beat some of the best decks in the room, but there are some decks that have a target on the back, because Raging Bolt has been one of the best decks in format for a really long time. So give Raging Bolt a try. It's not really too much different. You could play Miraidon, or sorry, you could cut that for Ultra Ball or another one of the one-of trainers of your choice. But to enter into the top 4, let's see what we got going on at that number 4 spot. At number 4, we have Snorlax with that block ability, blocking a lot of those Pokemon. And I think Snorlax is one of those decks where, as decks cut a lot of their switch cards, they just might go with Latias EX now instead of playing switch. Snorlax says you cannot retreat, that blocks Latias EX. And if anything, with Latias EX being entered into the metagame, I think that Snorlax has a lot to gain. Using Mimikyu with Mist Energy to kind of block your opponent's Pokemon from attacking them. And of course, that Cornerstone Ogerpon EX that does stop your opponent from attacking it if they have any abilities. So I think there's a lot of really cool things. This is Cal Connor's list. I believe he made top 64 at Sacramento Regionals, having a very successful run there. I think Snorlax, if anything, has a lot to gain from the upcoming metagame. Sure, there might be some difficulties from some of the absolute top decks, or maybe some of the bottom decks like Roaring Moon EX, but I think a lot of players might not necessarily counter Snorlax, or we might get to a point where they overly counter Snorlax. I'm not sure whether that's going to be at Toronto or not, but I do think we are going to see a little bit of an uptick in Snorlax decks as we enter into the Stuttgart Regionals, and then we'll have to see how the rest of the metagame follows after that. So, as always, stay tuned for our metagame update videos. Those are going to typically be on Wednesday or Thursday, and then, of course, see the top 10 best decks before we enter into Bogota Regionals, because this weekend we have Stuttgart Regionals in Germany. At number 3, we have Landon Caitler's Miraidon EX deck that he won the Sacramento Regional Championships with. I think it's an absolute fantastic take on the deck. I really like a lot of the way that this deck plays out. And when you hit those electric generators, boy oh boy, this deck absolutely dominates. Being able to search for your Pokemon with Tandem Unit, being able to kind of use Pikachu EX where we previously had Mewtwo EX. Now your opponent can't necessarily just bring it up and crumble your whole Area 0. Adding Latias EX to the deck. Now, this might be one of those decks that I was talking about that could struggle against a little bit, like that Snorlax deck, because no switch card, just cut switch card, add in Latias, is the mentality of a lot of the decks in this format. That might have to change in the next little bit, but this deck incredibly powerful, and you can see one of the cool things about Surging Sparks is the decks that really have added things like the Pikachu, the Magneton, the Latias. Those are the decks that are really seeing success in the top 10. So yeah, while the new archetypes aren't necessarily kind of crushing it, we are kind of breathing life into decks like Miraidon that would be barely considered in the top 20 or so decks. Now they're considered a top 3 deck in format. I'll have to see how this keeps on going, but if you just want to keep on racing your opponent for those prize cards, crushing them with those electric generators and hitting for a lot of damage, this is really your deck. Now we're about to enter into the top 2 decks in format. If you haven't already, put your best guesses. I'm sure a lot of you already know what they are, but if you're new to these type of videos or not, put your best guesses in the comments below. We do get back to all comments, and of course give this video a like and let us know anything that you want, maybe future content you want to see, even just being like, yo, happy Thanksgiving, Zach. Even though I am Canadian, we celebrated a month ago. All of it does help the YouTube algorithm. Let's jump into that number 2 pick. Breathing some of that burning darkness hot fire is Charizard EX at our number 2 deck. Now Charizard EX, I feel, gained a lot with all these big basics. We've seen Roaring Moon, we've seen Miraidon, we've seen Raging Bolt. It has a great matchup against all of those, holds its own against a lot of these other decks on this list, and of course with cards like Professor Turo and Canceling Clone can also hold its own against decks such as Snorlax, and really can go toe-to-toe with Gardevoir. Like, you can go through, and Charizard, there's a reason why it's at number 2. It's very well positioned in this metagame, and it's great news. There's that Charizard EX League Battle deck. Maybe you've seen it at your local game store, Walmart, Target, anywhere. If you're new to the Pokemon, or if you're just trying to build an extra deck in format, I mean, Prime Catcher alone is typically a $14, $15 card. I think the League Battle decks are going from $15 to $25, depending where you are in the US. Otherwise, it's a little bit inflated elsewhere globally, but it is a fantastic choice if you are trying to kind of update. I think a deck like this is going to be maybe $20 off from that if you go to your local game store or go to Kayfabe Cards and try to pick up some cards. Absolutely a fantastic deck choice where you're loading up energies with Charizard, scaling your damage as the game progresses, controlling your opponent with Dusknoir and Briar. We have a lot of really cool things that you can do with this deck, and I think this is a very solid build. We have seen some other top players such as Ruhul Reddy play Precious Trolley builds of this deck, so Charizard's really, you can kind of put it in any direction you want. Certainly a lot of opportunities when it comes to this deck. So let's see how it continuously grows in our format. But right now it's at number 2. If you haven't guessed number 1, why haven't you guessed number 1 yet? I know what it is. Do you know what it is? We'll have to see. Let's jump into our number 1 pick of the week, heading into Stuttgart Regionals. It is another week, and it is another week with Regidrago VSTAR on top of our list. Now, we do have an updated version from Sacramento Regionals. I believe this is Grant Shen's list with that Alolan Executor EX, giving yourself an opportunity to coin flip to knock out your opponent's active basic Pokemon or their bench basic Pokemon. Now, in a case where you're playing against a deck like Raging Bolt, they could have a Bolt with a Bravery Charm in the active, and they could have a Teal Mask Ogerpon on the bench. Well, Swinging Fiend does not care. It's going to knock out and draw 2 prize cards either way, and it can be especially helpful against Pokemon such as Mimikyu and Cornerstone Masked Ogerpon, as long as they do not have that copy of Mist Energy attached to them. We do have a copy of Terra Orb, again breathing some life into this deck, giving yourself an opportunity to search for multiple Pokemon, but not limited to Teal Mask Ogerpon, Alolan Executor EX, and even Dragapult EX. I do like Goodra in this metagame because I think there are a lot of big basic decks and a few handful of things that you might want to do some damage reduction to, but it really takes that strong build that we've had forever. We cut the Noctowl, added a few more techs, and now I feel the deck is better than ever. I could see Temple of Sinnoh being replaced for Pokestop or one of the other cards in this deck to give yourself an option against those Mist Energy kind of control builds that we might see coming in the next few weeks with maybe Pidgeot EX, Snorlax, Mimikyu, Cornerstone Ogerpon. That would help with the Alolan Executor, but right now we have it at number 1. Again, all these lists are available in the pinned comment, copy and pastable, right into PTCG Live. And if you need any of the code cards to craft these decks on PTCG Live, check out our sponsor at ptcgostore.com and plug in code TSS5. That being said, let me close things out. Looks like we have another fine week of decks, and I'm really excited to see everyone kind of try out these decks on PTCG Live, at our late night events tournaments, and maybe even see some of these deck lists at Stuttgart Regionals. I also want to see the results of Stuttgart Regionals because there's a lot of things that could kind of enter into our top 10 going forward. We've seen Cloth Terapagos see success. We've seen Ancient Box see success. I want to see that Cornerstone Mimikyu deck kind of block some other deck. I want to see our Chaladon, Ceruledge, and Hydreigon see success. I don't know, I'm just a fan of Pokemon, a fan of decks, and I really want to see what the metagame can kind of come up with as I prepare for my next major, Toronto Regionals. If any of y'all are attending that event, hope to see y'all there. Let's take a picture, let's shake hands, let's just talk Pokemon for a half a minute. That being said, stay tuned for more great content from us. That's all the videos that we got going on for this week, but stay tuned for our Monday video. We have some tabletop gameplay going on there, some interesting decks, and if there's any tabletop gameplay that you want to see, let us know which matchups you want to see on that. PJ and I or anyone else will try to get around to making those videos to at least showcase some really cool decks. Lists are always going to be available in the description. As always, check out our sponsors at Kayfabe Cards, PTCGO Store, Ultimate Guard, and now Advanced GG. We love their energy drink supplements, so check out them, all available in our description and anywhere else where you might see the Shuffle Squad post, like social media on X. That being said, happy Thanksgiving weekend, everyone, and I'll catch up with all y'all soon. Peace out and have a great one.
Want to support the Shuffle Squad? Be sure to check out all of our sponsors in the description to pick up Pokemon TCG singles, sealed, and PTCG live codes. You made it to the end. Thank you so much for watching this entire video from the Shuffle Squad. Honestly, from the bottom of our hearts, we appreciate each and every person that supports our content, watches what we have going on every single day, every single week, even from time to time, and continuously allows us to have a forum to project our creative content towards the Pokemon TCG community. So if you haven't already, be sure to give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and even leave a comment to help boost the YouTube algorithm. That being said, we'll catch you with our next video. Thanks again. Take it easy.